So this is the story of Judy Garland, someone I knew virtually nothing about. I mean, I didn't even know she was the girl in The Wizard of Oz, but apparently she was. Which meant that she was a star from a very young age, and like many child stars, her life wasn't as easy as one might imagine, and the movie gets a bit into the reasons why. But the main story here follows her when she's in her late 40s, at a time when she's going through a bit of a rough patch, financially and career-wise as well. And I guess on a very personal level too when it comes to her family life. Oh, and I guess it's worth mentioning that Judy herself is played by Renee Zellweger, someone I've never been a huge fan of. Well, I just couldn't think of a single movie I've seen her in that I've cared for. Although after checking her IMDb, turns out she's been in a few good movies. I just didn't remember her being in them. But anyway, she was definitely not a very strong selling point for me personally. But on the other hand, I hadn't seen her in quite a while in anything really. So I was a bit curious to see what she would do with this role. And I gotta admit, she's actually really good in this, not bad at all. And the movie as a whole was pretty solid too, I did end up enjoying it a fair bit. Which probably makes this my favorite role I've seen her in at least like a decade. And she did a really good job playing this sort of neurotic and a bit unstable character. An aging actress slash performer who's been famous her entire life. Who's also struggling to find work and who still suffers from self-doubt and a bit of that imposter syndrome. On top of that, add the stress of her private home life that's a bit of a mess. And you have a pretty interesting character and kind of a tragic story too. Which this is. Fairly tragic, and I couldn't help but to sympathize with her. And for the entire movie I was just rooting for her and hoping she'd get her act together. Since I had no idea how her story or the movie would end either, because I knew nothing about her life. Which obviously made this a lot more interesting for me personally. But even if you're familiar with her story from before, I think this should still work. Because it's a pretty solid movie on pretty much every level. I didn't really have many issues with it at all, although there was one tiny little thing that bothered me. In regard to her stage performances, they just looked dubbed over. Which I realize they usually are in movies, but I've seen plenty of movies where they don't look dubbed over. And in fact the final performance here for some reason didn't look the same, it looked like a live take. But again, it wasn't really a major issue or anything, just something I picked up on. And yeah, overall I thoroughly enjoyed this, it's a pretty decent movie. About someone in the spotlight who's had a bit of a troubled life. Which just goes to show that just because you're famous doesn't mean life doesn't throw obstacles in your way. They might just be slightly different obstacles than most people have to deal with. But the standout in this for me personally was absolutely Renee Zellweger. And her central performance definitely brought this whole thing up a notch. So how about it? Would I recommend this? Sure, why not? Especially if you're not familiar with Judy Garland from before. But even if you are, I don't know, maybe give it a shot. Or don't. After all, I'm not your dad. But hey, what are your thoughts on this? Have you seen it? Did you like it? Let me know. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe give it a thumbs up or sub to the channel, because that would be fantastic. And if you'd like, you can also support me on Patreon or PayPal through the links in the description. And as always, I appreciate you and thanks for watching.